welcome back to 50 Days to Rebuild. This is the series where I do 50 minutes of exercise in a day and read 50 pages of a physio book in an attempt to rehab myself. This is day 17. Starting off with the curl up exercise, I was cognizant of trying to lock my head and neck down to the rib cage, following on from what I learned yesterday, and I felt like I was much better able to do this. And the idea of rotating from the sternum as opposed to exclusively imagining it from my upper thoracic back I found helpful. And also not putting my hand under my low back, because the only reason you have to do that is just in case you're having trouble maintaining that spinal position, and for the most part I don't think I am. So not putting my hands there meant that I wasn't having shoulder pain in it, because normally I have quite an internal rotation limitation. And I have to do a lot of work to make that position okay. So just being able to take that away was a lot better. With the cat-cow, cat-camel, whatever it is, I did try that light brace today and really focus on having my hands and knees directly below my shoulders and my hips respectively, and it did feel better. I tried to feel that more integrated pushing into the range, not trying to stretch, just really pushing through and getting that expansion and flexion through each vertebra, and it did feel a lot better. With the side plank, it was a lot better getting to a more aligned position where from head to toe everything is in one straight line. I noticed on the right side in particular I had like a better glute squeeze, but I couldn't really replicate this on the left side. And again, I think this comes back to the idea of the TFL strumming that occurs, especially again on the left. That I can't really get that squeeze because I'll sort of dump into a non-neutral pelvic position. Again, I think this speaks to the fact I need to mobilize something around the hips. With the bird dog, unfortunately, this is something I've not been wanting to see, but I can't help but avoid seeing it. In some of the recordings, I feel like my spine is experiencing some level of rotation or lateral flexion when my right arm is lifting. So yeah, the left is planted. I think I need to regress this. I was a bit stubborn about it today. I started trying to regress, but then trying to do it really quick from there. The reason for that is like it actually feels good to do it on the left. Like even afterwards, I tried to do some glute bridge work, and my left sacroiliac joint hurt more because I hadn't done the proper bird dog. So yeah, it's a bit of a give and take, and then it's like, well, I can't really groove a new motor pattern with pain present. Like I've just learned that. So yeah, it's a bit of a difficult scenario, but I do think I might have to regress a bit. With the hip hinge, ultimately just really good. I was really happy with it, don't have too much to add, it's just getting easier. With the bridge, again, the first one was a bit of a difficulty, but I was definitely improving on it compared to the other days. It's feeling way easier to get my quads to fire. Also the glute activation I was better able to get by A, trying to imagine it, as McGill said to do, and then B, trying to imagine that I was squashing a walnut, as the cue that I normally hear is holding a coin, but I feel like this walnut cue was sort of better to continue the activation versus, in my mind, the idea of holding the coin, like you sort of reach a point where you don't need it anymore. Just so it goes to show how very similar cues can have different effects for different people. But I was happy that worked, and yeah, I was just really happy that that's coming along. I also did the clamshell to get some glute activation, although I did accidentally do this after doing the bridge, but it felt good. And then I tried to do the bridge afterwards, and actually it did feel a bit better than the one previous to it. I also tried one of the active flexibility stretches that was in the book from yesterday. This actually went alright, so sort of just like a straddle position, eventually trying to get to a pancake. I have very little range of motion, but it felt alright. Like I felt like I kept neutral, and I had some tension sort of through my glutes and my legs. I still don't really know exactly how to squeeze yet. I think I'm going to try and find some books to read about that, probably like some PNF stuff. But yeah, like there wasn't that much guidance around how to do it in the book, but it felt okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. Jumping into what I learned today, ran through the whole progression for endurance. So for endurance training, we should start by making sure that we don't get tired as we're doing it. Then we want to work through a descending pyramid. So say we're doing 8 reps to start, and then 6, and then 4 for those of the different sets. Then we want to add more reps into those sets, so maybe we go 10, 8, 6, and then finally we want to add on duration. This explains a point I was confused about yesterday, which was him saying that during the roll, so for the side plank, the plank, and the other side of the side plank, we want 10-second holds at minimum for each position. basically, to me, that's suggesting, well, you shouldn't really be doing this till you have some of that higher endurance. Really cool, he discussed croc breathing. So this is just laying prone on the ground and then trying to get your brace and do your breathing into the ground so that your abs and your whole belly pushes into the ground and then your body lifts. This seems so akin to using a Coregeous ball to massage the whole like abdominal area and viscera from Jill Miller, which is how I ultimately got belly breathing. This seems like a more athletic approach because I guess, yeah, we are going to keep more of a neutral spine. Whereas I thought that was maybe more of a proprioceptive approach. But this seems cool. Interestingly, he also mentioned that all of the different back exercises he's mentioned so far, like the McGill Big Three, don't fully activate the like spinal extensors, and that they essentially can't. And he said that he had some like powerlifter or Olympic squatter or something come through, and he was able to get a much more maximal activation. And part of that was he could imagine the activation properly, and also from doing some form of concentric work in extension. The way that he said to do this was to get kind of looked like an elongated Roman chair so that you could sort of cantilever over the top of like a 45-degree bench, and starting with say like the bench at your nipples and coming from into a little bit of flexion and then extending back to neutral, and then continually dropping this like the bench so that eventually it's like at your waist, and then you can come to like a flat bench and do a similar thing. He also said you could do this on like a gym ball and with holding weights in your hands. Because I've never seen that contraption before, but yeah, that was interesting because like we are coming into flexion, we're not coming into much extension, but that's some range of motion through the spine. Now, this section had a lot of recommendations around the different types of exercises that we should run through. So starting more generally, he recommended dumbbells over barbells just from an athletic perspective, not having many situations where both hands were locked in a similar position. Which I found intriguing. That makes a lot of sense to me. We can get more asymmetric approaches and therefore also load the abs more. Running again through some different gym equipment, he talked about bands, and he really liked them to attach the barbells and then strap weights to them. So you had like a more labile apparatus, so you had to really balance well when doing like a squat, for example. And then with chains, discuss like how Westside Barbell does that, and then it more accurately represents the strength curve, so it can be quite helpful if you do it in a similar approach, like putting it on, say, like a barbell. For some of the upper back development, he recommended pull down, so some form of like a lat pull down, also like a one arm cable pull down. It looked like somebody was laying, almost side laying on a 45-degree bench, but then kind of turned towards it a bit, and then doing this sort of pull down. Very intriguing little exercise. And then just also working through pull-ups. To develop torsional strength, he recommended a one-arm cable press. And on the point of torsional strength, he said that in the process of developing different types of strength, you want to work in the sagittal plane. So that's sort of like forward and back. And then from there, start working laterally and then do torsional, because torsional could put like 4 times more stress on the spine. So you really got to build up in that sort of sequence. Coming to exercises he recommended for the whole sort of abdominal region, he recommended some sort of walkout, so starting in like a bit of a plank and then sort of walking the hands out. Also some sort of overhead cable pull down. And I think prior to that, actually like a stir the pot exercise. So on a gym ball, basically in a plank and sort of stirring and doing circles. And then the final thing he recommended was medicine ball throws. Probably the more interesting concept that came up here was something called dynamic correspondence. This was mentioned earlier in the book, but I didn't quite follow it there. I think it was better explained here, which was essentially that when one limb's going in one direction, the other one's going in the other, which is what happens when we're running, for example. So as one's entering flexion, the other one's entering extension. And he says you want to train this. So he said the best way to do this is essentially in a single leg squat. You need a lot of core stability to be able to even do this in the first place. And he loves the single leg squat in general, but then as we're coming into extension, bringing the sort of recovery leg up hard into flexion, again maintaining that neutral spine. And he said eventually you can use a cable to even load that. And again, touching on that single leg squat, he said it's generally much better than a normal squat athletically, because most positions are going to have more of that single leg balance and sort of cutting, and that sort of approach just makes more sense. Though he did say to be careful, because if you overload it, you can get a lot of SI joint pain. For working on extension, he had a few interesting exercises I haven't really seen before. He had an overhand press 2-legged squat. So it's almost like you're about to dive. And then you get into like a good stance, and then you start hip hinging forward, but you're sort of pressing through your hands in this dive position. And then he had you sort of redo that with like a single-legged good morning, so same sort of like overhead position, and then eventually picking up a weight with that. And there he recommended suitcase and farmer's carries. Very intriguing that he touched on the reverse hyper here, because it's something that I've been very intrigued by ever since I saw Louis Simmons talk about it. He was saying like it could be good. It can put a lot of shear instability in through the spine. He didn't touch on the decompressing part of it, which I know is what like Louis Simmons talked about being helpful. But he said it could be a good extensor exercise, but it's a bit risky. He preferred sort of a cable exercise where you're sort of pulling through the legs and then back up into a hip hinge. Or alternatively, just running through some sort of like sled drag. I thought I was hallucinating reading this at one point because he recommended doing a car push. I guess like this is when we get into like the most sort of athletic portions, but he said this is like a triplanar movement. It's great foot development, really helps at pushing through the sticking points. That was weird but cool. He said with box squats, they're okay, but they can be risky. It's possible you lose a lot of that sort of stability as you sit. So you really don't, yes, you want to relax, but you only want like the hips to relax, not the rest of your brace. With building through external rotation, he said you want to start with the hip airplane. Definitely not there yet. I've had some issues with that. And then this weird like cable pull. He said he wanted to be ballistic, driven exclusively by the hips. Very strange. I don't know how you do that, but I guess that's kind of beyond me for now. He said plyometrics are just incredible, but the prerequisite for it is to be able to do a ballistic bird dog. Then we can start moving there. In terms of how to actually go about that quick and plyometric approach, he said you really essentially need to hype people up. He kind of validated that like gym bro, like let's go, like just slapping people. He said like someone putting like a hand on your shoulder, like come on mate, let's do it. It will actually calm you down. But if you're getting right in front of them, sort of smacking them, you're yelling, like that's actually the approach you want for like a quick execution. It was so cool. He covered this double pulse thing. He said was really important for any sort of like MMA, like any sort of striking, where this idea of like a rigid core and then a pulse was covered earlier, a pulse into like a rapid relaxation. But here it's a pulse to get the, say the fist or the foot moving, then you rapidly relax as the distance between you and the target is reduced, and then just as you're impacting, full body tension, so that that's fully transferred through the hit. I thought that was cool that we could have some sort of like double pulse. The last thing I covered here was just around designing a program. He recommended rather than having light and heavy days, just to have fast and slow days, so that you do get that ability to have like a dense strength, but also more of that like athletic capacity. And that about wraps it up for day 17. We are going to finish McGill tomorrow, so very excited for that. And yeah, thanks for listening and hope you have a good one.